Boker Tov. We're going to dedicate this shiur, of course, to the memory of the fallen soldiers, for 24,068 of them. 24,068 lost lives, 24,068 bereaved families and friends. Each one of them a world of their own. 24,068 lost worlds. But we are the beneficiaries. It's not lost for nothing. We are privileged to be here in this country because of their sacrifice, and we must never forget it. So we dedicate this shiur to them, and also to the memory of Rachel Bat Dina, who I was asked to dedicate to her memory as well, Leonie, and I can't remember her second name now. I'm sorry.
Lewis,
that's it. Thank you. So Rachel Bat Dina, her memory should be for a blessing as well. We will, of course, in the middle of the shiur have the tefillah, the siren. Of course, we will stop what we're doing and we will stand in contemplation. And we dedicate our learning day to the memory of those Gemarah.
So as soon as
I'm going to just mute everybody because there's a lot of background noise. Okay, so let's learn some Gemara. Now, those of you who recall, I left off last week with the promise of something very unsatisfactory. Something which always bothered me for many years when I was learning Gemara. I started learning Gemara at the age of 10, and it bothered me straight away when I first came across this concept, and it continues to bother me today, but less so, because you know what? Things do bother you less as you get older, and you realize that there are more important things than getting hot under the collar about things that better people than me have grappled with. So I'm going to show it you anyway, because it's in the Gemara, and you'll understand where I'm coming from, I'm sure. I'm going to put the Gemara on the screen in a second. Those of you who are in the Steinsaltz, we're on the bottom we're on the top of page 64. It's in the middle of 12b. In Sanhedrin. Let me get the screen on for you now. There it is, hopefully in a second or two. You should have it. You got it? Yeah? Okay, good. Right, so we were in the middle of a discussion as to whether a year can be intercalated because of impurity of a majority of the people. We know the concept that you can't bring a korban, a sacrifice, if you are tameh, if you're impure. And we also learned of the idea that impurity can be put aside, either temporarily or permanently, depending on your point of view, if a majority of the people are in a state of impurity for whatever reason. Meaning that in that scenario, korbanot, sacrifices, could be brought in a state of tumah. And then we had the discussion as to whether that was permitted or not. And we had an opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda said one thing, Rabbi Shimon said something else, and they brought a story of Chizkiyahu Melech Yehuda, Chizkiyahu, the king of Judah, who intercalated a year because everybody was tameh. Remember, he was the kosher part of a treifa sandwich. His father and his son were wicked kings, and he was a very holy man, Baal Teshuvah, first Eish HaTorah director, Chizkiyahu Melech Yehuda. And when he came to power, as it were, the people were all tamei because they'd been busy serving idols under the stewardship of his father. So he then said, okay, well, you're all tamei, so we're going to have to intercalate a year to give you time to get pure before the Korban Pesach. And then what we were told, this is all going back on last week, we were told that he realized he'd done something wrong and asked God for forgiveness for doing such a thing. And the discussion was all around what he had done wrong. So let's just go a bit further up the page. We talked about the tzitz as well. So they, we have over here, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says, Ma'abrin. We are allowed to intercalate a year because of Tumah. We need to go back a little bit further than that. Here we go. This is what I wanted to show you. This is where we all started. Tanu Rabbanan, the sages taught, Ein ma'abrin et hashana mipnei tumah. We do not intercalate because of Tumah. That's not one of the reasons. Rabbi Yehuda, on the other hand, says, yes, we do. Ma'abrin. And he brought the story of Chizkiyahu Melech Yehuda as a proof. And he said that he did do this. Okay? And so that was the thing. So Rabbi Yehuda says, we do allow the intercalation of the year. We then went on and said that this proved Rabbi Yehuda's concept that we push aside the Tumah as a result of we push aside the Tumah so that we can do the Korbanot when there is Tumah but Tzibur. And then we talked about the tzitz a bit, and now we're going to come to this bit here. Now, so we have a discussion now between what really is Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, because the first part of the Brisa tells us that Rabbi Yehuda allows intercalation. And then later on, he says, well, there was an incident, this story with Chizkiyahu, and then he requested Rachamim. He apologized for it. So what does Rabbi Yehuda really think? Are you allowed to or not allowed to? If you're allowed to, why did he have to apologize for it? And if you're not allowed to, and he had to apologize, why did Rabbi Yehuda say in the Brisa that you're allowed to? So we seem to have a direct contradiction here between Rabbi Yehuda on the one hand and Rabbi Yehuda on the other hand. He seems to be saying two mutually exclusive, directly opposite things. And this is the bit that we come to now, which gives me a little bit of grief. So what do you do in a scenario where you have two statements about one rabbi which are mutually exclusive? You have to say, there's only one way out of it, isn't there? Anyone like to suggest a way out of a mutually exclusive contradiction? Julia?
Wouldn't you assume that the later one must be correct because he's changed his mind?
Oh, okay. You could say that, yes. That's assuming you knew which was first and which was second. Okay. I'm not sure that we do in this scenario, but that's a fair comment, Julia, fair comment. You could say that the first one, the second one was having reconsidered and reflected on his opinion. He's changed his opinion. Any other suggestions? Leslie, you've unmuted. What do you think?
I think you ignore both opinions because, as you say, they're mutually exclusive and therefore don't give you an opinion.
Okay, so you can. We've got that situation in the shul at the moment. We have a situation where two people both think that they have bought the same seat or the same two seats, and neither of them are willing to give in. As it so happens, they're both correct. They did both buy the same seats, and neither of them are willing to give up. And so one of the suggestions around the table. This has taken many, many hours of this heated discussion. One of the suggestions is we take them off both of them, and neither of them should have the seat because they're both being intransigent. Nobody's giving in. So that would be the equivalent of Leslie's opinion. Ignore both of them because we don't know. There is a third suggestion, and that's the suggestion of the Gemara. And that is that one of these statements must be incorrect. It can't be that Rabbi Yehuda says two mutually exclusive things. Somebody must have reported one of the statements to be incorrectly. So either somebody said incorrectly that Rabbi Yehuda allows intercalation because of Tumah, or somebody said incorrectly that he doesn't allow it, because he can't both allow it and not allow it. So let's have a look and see how our Gemara deals with this. And this is a concept, and you have to understand, and I think this is what I didn't really grasp when I was 10, and I didn't understand the significance of it. You have to understand that this was all verbal. It was oral. People were reporting what other people had said. We've got it written down. The printing press wasn't invented until the 16th century, I think. Is that right? 16th century, the printing press, something like that. 15th or 16th. Certainly a long, long time after this, there were manuscripts. And these manuscripts were written down by hand, and they were reporting what other people had said. So actually, it's a bloody miracle that anything was ever reported correctly. It's amazing that anything is consistent with one thing or another. And I never really understood that concept. It just bothered me that what happens is what we're going to see now. Oh, we're over here at the top of page 64 here. Ole tiamich, and according to your reasoning, you can see the word ta'am in the middle of that word, ta'am, which has two meanings in Hebrew. Ta'am means reason, and it also means taste. Ta'am is taste. I remember my grandmother of blessed memory, when she was almost 100 years old, she had lost her inhibitions, and she was in Heathland's old people's home, and they brought some nice volunteer musicians group to come and play music for the elderly folk, and they wheeled her into the front row in her wheelchair, and she played their songs and what have you. And somebody said to her afterwards, "Well, Bessie, did you enjoy that?" She says, "No, it had no time," and that means it was rubbish. And so time means taste. It was no good. So it also means reasoning. And according to your reasoning, tikshelach hi gufa. This tikshe, can you see the word kasher in there? Kasher. Kasher means difficulty. If something is kasher, it is hard or difficult. We asked those of you who asked the 4 questions when you were young in Yiddish, as I did, and the Manish Tana in Yiddish. Stephen, did you do the Manish Tana in Yiddish? No? Who did the Manish Tana in Yiddish? Apart from me. Nobody? So I used to have to say, Tata, ich will de fragen de 4 kashas. Father, I want to ask the 4 questions. Kashas is difficulties, questions. So tikshelach hi gufa. Gufa means the body. Guf is the body. Where do we have guf? The word guf. We sing it on Friday nights. Stephen, come on, you've sung it a few million times.
In Yigdal.
In Yigdal, that's right. Ein lo guf, ein lo demuta guf. God doesn't have a body, and he doesn't have any semblance of a body. Guf means body. So this expression here means the body of this, he gufa, this body, tikshelach, poses a difficulty for you. In other words, this is an intrinsic contradiction. In itself, in its body, it's difficult. This doesn't make sense, the Gemara is saying. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says, and he's quoting the Brisa now, Ma'abrin, we're allowed to intercalate. Va'amar Rabbi Yehuda, and then Rabbi Yehuda, the same Rabbi Yehuda says, Ma'aseh b'Chizkiyahu melech Yehuda, the story tells us the story of Chizkiyahu the king. She'iber et hashana mipnei hatumah. He did this. He intercalated the year, put an extra month in, because of everybody was tamei, and then bikesh rachamim al atzmo, and then he asked for forgiveness for doing it. So either you're allowed, or you're not, like we said before. And here comes the bit that used to bother me. Ela chasurei mechsera. There is something missing. Chasar. If you say in Hebrew, chasarli mashu, it means I'm missing something. Chasarli. So if you go to shul and there's only 9 people there, you would say chasar echad leminyan. There's one missing for the minyan. So chasar mechserele means, where have I gone? I've lost it here. There. Chesurei mechsere means there's something missing out of this brisa. When this brisa was quoted by the Gemara, when it was brought forward, it was incomplete. Somebody quoted it with a bit missing. And v'hachi katani. And this is what it really should have said. Ein ma'abrin et hashana. Missed out a very important word. Ein ma'abrin et hashana. We do not intercalate the year. And you can understand why it used to bother me, because they just completely got out of a pickle by just completely turning one of the things on its head and saying, well, he said you can intercalate, but really what he meant was you can't intercalate. And you can understand why that used to really bother me, because it just seemed such a cop-out. When you think about how it came to be and the sophistication of the Gemara, I think, it's amazing that there aren't more of these chasurei mechseri. There's quite a lot, but, it's amazing that there aren't more. So I'm far, far more tolerant of this idea of a brisa being quoted incorrectly than I used to be in my what's the word, fiery youth, where everything had to be just so, or else it didn't work for me. So, and it should have said, Ein Mabrin. Rabbi Yehuda's opinion now is consistent. Now that you've changed the brisa on its head, you've now got 2 brisas that fit one another. His opinion is you're not allowed to do it. And therefore, when Chizkiyahu HaMelech did it, he had to ask for forgiveness. He had to apologize for it because he got it wrong. He didn't do it on purpose. He didn't know. He forgot, made a mistake, worked it out wrong. Whatever it was, he was not meant to have done such a thing. So that's this concept of chasurei mechsere is something which comes up not infrequently, but as you can imagine, it's a bit of a last resort, because the Gemara doesn't like to use it, because the Gemara likes to play happy families. It likes it when all the opinions fit with one another. And when we've got 2 differing opinions from Rabbi X and Rabbi Y, we usually say, actually, they really agree with one another, only they're talking about different cases. And that's how we get over that. But when we have Rabbi X and Rabbi X, in our case, Rabbi Yehuda, saying 2 different things, we sometimes have our backs to the wall and we have to use this concept of saying, well, one of these expressions, one of these brisas must be wrong. And that's what we've done here.
Johnny,
yes.
Johnny, aren't there 2 possibilities? One, that when he said it incorrectly. That wasn't what he was actually thinking, but he was distracted. But also when it was first recorded, that the word not was missed out.
Yeah, I think more likely the latter than the former. We would use the latter more than the former, because we wouldn't want to suggest that Rabbi Yehuda would make such a simple schoolboy error of getting distracted and saying something completely the opposite of what he meant. I think that what it's saying is Chasurei Meser doesn't mean that he got it wrong. It means that, as you said, the second thing you just said, it was reported incorrectly. Either it was misheard in the first place, or in the transmission over time, it's got adulterated and bits of it got missing, which is hardly surprising. If you look at the, I don't know about you, but whenever I look at the fragments of the Dead Sea Scroll or anything like that, and you see that clever people have managed to piece together all sorts of amazing things from one tiny little fragment. It's really quite remarkable that it's as detailed, the Gemara is as detailed and as accurate as it is. And what this Chasurei Meser is telling us is that on this particular occasion, there was a bit missing, almost certainly in the reportage of it, rather than when it was first said in the first place. So you're right about that.
Isn't it more logical, the second one anyway, because it's in much more detail, and therefore the first one, you've just got one word missed out. The second one is in a great deal of detail and therefore is less likely to be incorrect.
And is more consistent with the rest of the Gemara. You're right, Michael. So, this is what it should say. And he quotes the whole brisa. Now, this is what the whole brisa should say. And you can understand when you just listen carefully to this brisa. Shut that phone off so I can find it. There we go. If you listen carefully to the brisa, you'll understand. Yes, this is how the brisa should be, with the bits put back in. We do not intercalate a year because of Tumah. Ve'in ibruha, and if we did it in the past tense, if it was done, i.e. not right, but it was done, mu'beret, it counts. It's considered to be intercalated. In other words, we don't undo the intercalation, although we shouldn't have done it in the first place. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, that's the first opinion. Rabbi Yehuda says, oh no, if you do it, eina mu'beret, it doesn't count. You can do whatever you like, but it don't count. That's the difference in the brisa between the two opinions. The Tanakama, meaning the first opinion, in this case, it's an anonymous opinion. Tanakama means the first opinion, it doesn't have a name. He says, you don't intercalate, but if it was done by mistake, we keep the extra month in. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, we don't. You're not allowed to do it. And if you do it, you've done nothing. It doesn't work. It's nothing. It's not counted. And that's the difference. Now, all good. Now we're all happy, yeah? We're all happy. They've got two opinions. One that says you can't intercalate, but if you do, we keep it. And one that says you can't intercalate, and if you do, we can't keep it. Everybody's happy, right? Wrong. We're not happy. Yes, Sharon, before we go on.
I beg everyone's pardon. I had to sign in late. But in terms of undoing it, do you undo the decision or the precedent? Because Hezekiah, if I'm not mistaken, had to declare impurity, simply that the temple was not pure enough so that a Passover sacrifice would not be a pure sacrifice. So his was really, he had to solve the problem. And how can you undo that decision by bringing your lamb at a time when the temple isn't open for business as a conduit to Hashem?
Okay, so the difference was here is that there was another solution. If you recall, we went through it a week or two ago, and that was Pesach Sheni. He didn't need to intercalate a year because there is already in the mechanism of the Torah a mechanism for people who are Tameh to have a second chance a month later at Pesach Sheni. And so his decision to intercalate the year, and we spoke about this last week, actually didn't make a difference as to the actual day that the Pesach offering was brought, because it was brought 30 days later. The difference was whether we called this month Nisan or we called it Iyar. If you intercalate the year and put another month in, another Adar, then the day that they brought the Korban Pesach was Pesach Rishon, the first Pesach. If they didn't intercalate the year, they still brought it on exactly the same day, only we haven't added in another month. Nisan has gone by, and we're now in Iyar. We're on Pesach Sheni. So the actual day, the physical 24-hour period that was used to bring the Korban Pesach was exactly the same. Chizkiyahu's mistake, if you call it that, was not to utilize Pesach Sheni, but to utilize a mechanism which is a rabbinic mechanism that says if more than half the people are tamei, you're allowed to put that tumah aside. And so he could have used the general Pesach Sheni situation, and he didn't do that. He intercalated the year and then made an amends for it. So we're at the situation where we seem to be quite comfortable with our brisa. We've got two different opinions, and we know what the difference is. But now the Gemara asks us another question, throws another curveball. That's for those who are not American, that's a baseball term, which means it's a googly. We would call it a googly. The English people would call it a googly. The Americans would call it a curveball. Here it comes. If so, we've got a problem, says the Gemara. How do you work this one out? Here's a quote. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon says, Im mipnei hatuma ibruha, if they did intercalate because of tum'ah, mu'uberet, it is counted. It counts. The intercalation holds. Hainu Tanakama. That's the same opinion we just said of the Tanakama. Well, the Bryce is not going to bring two identical opinions. That can't be. What's the point of that? Why would you bring the Tanakama who says X, and then you bring Rabbi Shimon who says exactly the same? You wouldn't do that. There must be a difference between the Tanakama and Rabbi Shimon. Otherwise, they wouldn't have brought both opinions. So we can't have it right. It must be wrong. One of them must be wrong. The Tanakama and Rabbi Shimon cannot be saying the same thing. Otherwise, we've not got a point of that Bryce. Amar Rava. So Rava, he is the one that gets us out of this pickle, and he plays the googly with a straight bat. I don't know what the equivalent of what you do with a curveball is, but with the googly you play a straight bat. And this is what he says. Lechatchila, in the first instance, ika beinaihu. There is a difference between them. Look at what Rabbi Shimon says. Rabbi Shimon does not say, look how carefully Rava looked at the Bryces. The Tanakama in our Brysa says, Ein ma'abrin et hashana mipnei atuma ve'im ibruha me'uberet. You don't do it, but if you did it, it counts. Rabbi Shimon, on the other hand, doesn't say that first part of the Brysa. He doesn't say you don't do it. He just says, if you did it, it counts. And Rava pounces on that and says, in the first instance, there is a difference because the Tanakama holds Ein ma'abrin et hashana mipnei atuma lechatchila. The Tanakama says you're not allowed to do it. In the first instance, you're not allowed to do it. Only after the event, b'di avad. After the event, if you did it, it counts. It's a bit like the concept of batel b'shishim. I'm sure you're familiar with that, of something being annulled 1/60th. If you have a bowl of meat in your fridge and some drops of milk drop into your bowl of meat in the fridge from your milk bottle, which is on a higher shelf, as long as that milk is less than 1/60th of the quantity of the meat, so what we're talking about, 1.8% or something, 1/60th, then the meat is not treif. You can eat it. However, that doesn't mean that you can put milk into your meat up to 1/60th in the first instance. You can't. But if it happens and it's less than 1/60th, it's okay. That's the difference between lechatchila in the first instance, you can't do it, and b'diavad, in the event that it happened, it's okay. That's the Tanna Kamma's opinion about intercalating months. In the first instance, you can't do it. But if you did it, it's okay. Whereas Rabbi Shimon, over here, have a look. Rabbi Shimon says, Ma'abrin, in the first instance, I allow it. It's not. So in our example of the meat, this is not true, of course, Rabbi Shimon, in our situation, you apply the same principle. He would be saying, you know what, you can get a bottle of milk and you can pour up to 1/60th of milk and make a lovely, chicken curry with milk in it, or, chicken tikka masala, or whatever it's called, with a bit of milk in it. You could have a cheeseburger as long as it's only less than 1/60th, according to that opinion. No. That's not what I'm saying, but that's the principle. Rabbi Shimon says, as far as intercalating the month is concerned, in the first instance, you can do it. The Tanna Kamma of our brisa says, no, you can't. But if you did it, it counts. The third opinion, which is Rabbi Yehuda, says you can't do it. And if you did it, it doesn't count. That's once we've altered our brises to make them match. So now we've got a nice, clear picture of the three opinions here. Before, we were a bit confused as to who held what, because the brises were not complete, bits were missing, and it didn't seem clear. So now we've got this sort of spectrum of opinion. The most lenient opinion is Rabbi Shimon, who says, if the people are tamei, more than 50% of the people are tamei, you are allowed to intercalate a month. You have the Tanna Kamma, unnamed and anonymous Tanna Kamma, who says that's not true. You're not allowed to do so. But if in error, b'diavad, it was done, then it counts. The intercalation keeps. And then you have the strictest of the three opinions, Rabbi Yehuda, who says you're not allowed to do it in the first instance. And if you did it, it doesn't count. Okay, now, we've got a problem, haven't we? We've got a problem about, for Rabbi Shimon. What's Rabbi Shimon's problem? Can anybody work out what Rabbi Shimon's problem is? Rabbi Shimon is the one that says you're allowed to do it in the first instance. What's his problem? What has he got to explain to us? Let's have a look. Rabbi Shimon Omer Ma'abrin. Rabbi Shimon says you're allowed to intercalate. Asks the Gemara, Ella, therefore, why? Mipnei ma bikesh rachamim al atzmo. Why did Chizkiyahu HaMelech have to apologize? What's he apologizing for? What's he asking for mercy for? He, according to Rabbi Shimon, didn't do anything wrong. You are allowed to intercalate the month, says Rabbi Shimon. So if you're allowed to intercalate the month, why did Chizkiyahu HaMelech have to apologize, ask for mercy after he'd done such a thing, which Rabbi Shimon says is perfectly permitted? Understand why the Tanna Kamma and Rabbi Yehuda say he had to ask for mercy or had to apologize, because he did something that they say he shouldn't have done in the first instance. But Rabbi Shimon says it's perfectly permitted. So what's his problem? Why does he have to ask for forgiveness? Any ideas?
I'm not sure if I've got a bit of deja vu, because I sort of thought I'd heard this before somewhere, but isn't it because he intercalated the wrong month?
Yes, you're right, Julia. Well remembered. You haven't. It's not deja vu. It's called remembering what we said in the previous shiur.
Okay.
Because I gave you the beginning of this subject. We did speak about when you're allowed to intercalate. Way back a few months ago now. when we started this whole intercalation business, who thought it would take us so long to get through this simple subject of intercalating a month? But when we started, we said that Adar was when you could do it, and you had to try and do it before Purim, remember, so that you didn't have two Purims. You didn't want to intercalate after Purim, because then you'd have another Purim afterwards. But you had to do it before the end of Adar. And then we had another part of the discussion where it said you could actually work it out, but you weren't allowed to announce it until after Rosh Hashanah. And even if you announced it early, it wasn't Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev, Tevet, which were intercalated. Even if you announced it in one of those months, the month that would be intercalated was always Adar. You're correct. And that's what the Gemara tells us. Rabbi Shimon says Chizkiyahu had to apologize or ask for forgiveness for, because he intercalated the wrong month. Not like we said before, he intercalated an earlier month, i.e. Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev, or Teves, but he intercalated too late. He intercalated on the 30th of Adar, which is potentially Rosh Chodesh Nisan. And here we go. Here's the Gemara, which Julia had her deja vu. Maybe you learned it in a previous Gilgul, Julia. I don't know. Rabbi Shimon Omer Ma'abri Mela Mipnei Ma Bikesh Rachamim Al Atzmo. Why did Chizkiyahu have to ask for forgiveness on himself? The answer's Rabbi Shimon. She'ein Ma'abrim Ela Adar. There's our Ein Ela sentence. Ein Ela, for those who've forgotten, means only. You're only allowed to intercalate the month of Adar. And what did he do? V'hu, and he, i.e. Chizkiyahu, Iber Nisan Nisan. He intercalated the month of Nisan in Nisan. Okay, well, what's wrong with that? Why shouldn't he do that? What's the big deal if he does that? We spoke about it briefly last time. Anybody remember? Yes, Stephen, unmute yourself.
It had to be the last year. It had to be Rosh Chodashim is already Nisan.
That's right. The first month has to be Nisan. I don't know about you, but I always was a little bit confused why Nisan was the first month and why Rosh Hashanah, New Year, was the first day of the 7th month. Has that ever crossed your mind? Isn't that a bit weird? Isn't New Year meant to be the first day of the first month? I mean, in the secular world it is. 1st of January is New Year. So why isn't New Year Rosh Chodesh Nisan? Why is Rosh Hashanah on the first day of the 7th month? And it even says so in the Torah. It says Rosh Hashanah will be on the first day of the 7th month. Now, I remember thinking that was a bit weird when I was very, very young, and then dismissing it because, you know, it's just one of those things. When you go to a Jewish primary school like I did, and a very, very good Jewish primary school, I might add, I'm very grateful to them for the superb basic education that I got in Judaism. You sort of live with that. It's sort of a given, you know. And Rosh Hashanah is the 1st of Tishrei. But when you think about it, it's weird. Tishrei is the 7th month. And we have a mitzvah. And this is what Leon was referring to when he was talking right at the beginning of this shiur about the footnotes. Because the footnotes here send us to the pasuk, which tells us all about Nisan being the first month of the year. And it is in Shemot, Parshat Bo, Sefer Shemot, chapter 12. And there it is on the screen. It'll be very familiar to you. And Leon will read it to us from the beginning of the chapter.
Hashem said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be for you the beginning of the months. It shall be for you the first of the months of the year.
There we go. So there you have it in black and white. In the Torah itself, Nisan is the first month. So if Nisan is the first month, and of course Pesach is on the 14th of the first month, we don't say, do we, that Pesach is in the 14th of Nisan? Does it say anywhere in the Torah that Pesach is on the 14th of Nisan? No, it doesn't. Where did those names of the months come from, by the way? Anybody know? Marcel, unmute yourself and tell us where those names of those months came from.
Bavel
and Persia, yeah. They are foreign names. Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, Av, Elul, Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev, Tevet, Shvat, Adar, and Adar Sheni. They are all not Hebrew names. They are foreign names. For example, Nisan, Av, let's think of one that's very obvious. Tammuz is an obvious one. I can't remember which particular mazal it is referring to, but it is the name of the mazal of that particular time. So these are not Hebrew names. None of them are Hebrew names. Nisan, Iyar, Sivan. Any of you ever heard any words in Hebrew that's, well, Nisan, I suppose you might say the word Nes, miracle is in there. And that's when Yetziat Mitzrayim took place. So I suppose you could bring that in, but they're not Hebrew names. They are foreign names which were adopted over the centuries by the Hebrew calendar, what we call the Hebrew calendar. It's not actually the Hebrew calendar, but it's been called the Hebrew calendar. So they're not. So you won't find anywhere in the Torah itself the names of the months. They are referred to by number. So Pesach has to be the 14th day of the first month. So if Nisan has to be Rosh Chodoshim, has to be the first month, then if you intercalate Nisan and you have a Nisan Bet, then when do you have Pesach? In the second month. And that's not what the Torah says. Torah says you have to have it in the first month. So that's why you can't, according to Rabbi Shimon, that's why you can't intercalate in Nisan. Yes, you can intercalate because of Tumah, says Rabbi Shimon. Let's go back to the Gemara. But you can only intercalate prior to the 30th of Nisan, not when you've already declared, the 30th of Adar. Once you've declared Nisan, you cannot then intercalate. And that, according to Rabbi Shimon, is what Chizkiyahu HaMelech did, and that is why he had to apologize, ask for forgiveness. The Gemara is the siren. Yehi Zichram Baruch. May their memories be for a blessing. Okay. With them in mind, we'll carry on. So that was what Chizkiyahu had to make his apology for and to ask for forgiveness. Let's do that in the Gemara itself. Amamar. It's on. Is it on the screen for you? You should see it. Yes. Okay. Amamar. The master said, "She'ein ma'abrim ela adar, v'hu iber Nisan b'Nisan, v'leit lei lechizkiyahu achodesh hazeh lachem, ze Nisan, v'ein acher Nisan." How could it be? Surely Chizkiyahu knew that. Surely Chizkiyahu HaMelech knew that he had to have only one Nisan. Nisan, there's ein acher Nisan. That is Nisan, and there can't be any other Nisan. Surely Chizkiyahu knew that. I don't think that's such a strong question, actually, because you have to remember that Chizkiyahu found Judaism, as it were, by mistake. He lived, as we said before, his father was a king who presided over a kingdom of almost entire idol worshippers. He sort of, the story is that he found a Sefer Torah and he said, "Oh, what's this?" And he had no idea. So I don't think it's such a strong question. I mean, how many Baalei Tshuva do we all know who don't know some of the basics because they haven't been taught? And they learn as they go along, and the more they learn, the more they know. But as I said, I was fortunate to have been brought up with this from the age of, I don't know, whatever old I was when I went to kindergarten, and everything was just sort of automatic for me. But Chizkiyahu HaMelech, he had to learn it all for himself as an adult. So I don't think it's such a strong question, actually. Did he not know that? Well, obviously he didn't, did he? Or else he wouldn't have done it. And so the Gemara answers the question, and he says, Ta'a, he made a mistake. Chizkiyahu made a mistake. And what did he make a mistake about? He made a mistake about halacha, which would later on be told us by somebody called Shmuel. Shmuel was one of the great Tanaim, and he said like as follows: the Amar Shmuel. Shmuel said, "Ein ma'abrim et hashana b'yom shloshim shel Adar." Not only can you not intercalate the year in Nisan, you can't do it on the 30th of Adar, even before you have declared the 30th of Adar to be Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Remember, the 30th of the month will become could become the 1st of Nisan. It could be that it will stay the 30th of Adar, but it could be that Adar is a 29-day month and the 30th will be the 1st. It depends on the witnesses that come. Now, I think Shmuel must have come from Manchester because he has taken the most chumradic position here, the most stringent position that there is possible. And what he has said is, we all know you can't intercalate a year in Nisan. Even Chizkiyahu knew that. But what he didn't know is that there's an extra stringency, says Shmuel. On the 30th of Adar, which is still Adar, 30th of Adar is Adar, isn't it? 30th of Adar is not the 1st of Nisan. Okay? It could be the 1st of Nisan, but if you don't make it into the 1st of Nisan, it stays at the 30th of Adar. He says, you're not even allowed to do intercalation on the 30th of Adar. So you would turn around, Chizkiyahu would turn around and say, why not? Still Adar? And he says, no. I'll tell you why, says Shmuel. Hoel v'ra'ui likva'o Nisan. Because that day it's fitting, it's possible that day could be Nisan. It could be that the 30th of Adar, if the right witnesses had come at the right time, that will actually be Nisan, and you will be making an intercalation on a day which could be Nisan, even though it wasn't. So it's almost like that fence around the fence around the fence. And that's the opinion of Shmuel, which it seems is the halacha. And it would appear that Chizkiyahu Nebuch did not know that particular chumrah, and that's why he felt that he had to ask for forgiveness, having intercalated, according to this opinion of the Gemara, according to this Mar, according to this master, we're not told who it is, that he intercalated the year on the 30th of Adar. So you can see now, this is typical Gemara technique, to hone down the case as fine as possible so that the circumstances are such that everybody agrees with everybody else, except in very, very circumscribed cases. And this is the case here, where Chizkiyahu, the story of Chizkiyahu, he intercalated the year on the 30th of Adar, thinking that he was doing the right thing. And somebody said to him later on, you know what, Kingy, you shouldn't have done that, because the Shmuel in another 1,000 years is going to tell you that you shouldn't have done that, and you should have not intercalated the year on the 30th of Adar. And so Chizkiyahu asked for forgiveness from that. Okay, and then we carry on. Ve'ihu savar, and Ihu, he held, who's he? Chizkiyahu held, Hoil v'ra'u lo amrino. We don't say that since this concept of since it was fit to be Nisan, we don't do it. Since it was technically, it says here, since it was technically still Adar, because it was the 30th of Adar, he initially thought it was permitted to intercalate the year on that day. And therefore, when he found out, he had to ask for forgiveness. And the Gemara then quotes another Braita, which is in support of our Braita, and it goes like this, very quite simply, states our position very clearly. And obviously, Chizkiyahu did not know this Braita. Not surprising, since it hadn't been written at that time and wasn't going to be written for another 800 years or 1,000 years or a bit more even. Tanya Nami Hachi, we've also learned in another Braita, Ein ma'abrin et hashana, we do not intercalate the year, B'yom shloshim shel Adar, on the 30th day of Adar, Hoil v'ra'ui likva'o Nisan, since it is a possibility, it is a fitting day, it might happen, it could happen, that day will be the first day of Nisan, and then you will have come up against the problem of intercalating a Nisan in Nisan, and you'll muck up the Torah law of HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem Rosh Chadashim. This month has to be the first month. So we have to be very careful about not going against a Torah law. And so the fence around that law, the yellow line on the platform that we speak about, is placed a little bit further back, and we say, even on the 30th day of Adar, when it's still Adar, technically you could do it. But we say, no, just in case, possibility it could be Nisan, and next year you might do it on the 30th of Adar, and it'll turn out that'll be the 1st of Nisan, and then you'll have gone against the Torah law. So it is, if you like, this is the muktzah. Muktzah, of course, is a rabbinic law, muktzah on Shabbat, that you're not allowed to move a certain object, a pen, for example. There's no Torah law that says you can't move a pen. There's a Torah law that says you can't write with a pen on Shabbat. Muktzah comes along, the rabbis come along and says you can't even move it, because if you move it, you might come to use it. So here, the Braita says you can't intercalate on the 30th of Adar in case next year you come to do it on the 30th of Adar when it's at Nisan. So we're making a fence around the halacha. Okay, so that's where we're going to stop for today. And next time we're going to talk about and I'll tell you what, we'll finish this bit, I think. We'll just finish this. No, we won't, because we're going to go on to women. We'll go on. We'll stop here, and next time we're going to talk about Pesach Sheni in a little bit more detail. And we're also going to ask the question, the big question. Are you ready, ladies? Do women count? Right? That's the question we're going to ask next week. Do women count? Okay? Those of you who don't want to know the answer, don't read on. That's a spoiler for next week. Do women count? Okay, any questions on what we've done today? Let me summarize what we've done today so that next week I will know where we're up to before we start. Today we came across a concept of Chasurei Mechterei, the Breita, which we were learning had something missing, and it's a sort of backs to the wall technique of the Gemara when it's got nowhere else to go. When we've got two contradictory statements, it says that one of them is incorrect. It's been transmitted in the Chinese whispers that was the way the Gemara and the Mishnah was transmitted and the oral law was transmitted. It got adulterated on the way, and the only explanation is that there were words missing, and that we said that we had three opinions. We had the Tanakama, who was the strictest opinion, who said, no, sorry, let's go the other way around. Rabbi Shimon, who was the most lenient opinion, says you're allowed to intercalate a year because of Tumah, and if you did, it's fine. The Tanakama says you're not allowed to, but if you did, it counts. And Rabbi Yehuda says you're not allowed to, and if you did, it doesn't count. We then asked, according to Rabbi Shimon, well, why was Chizkiyahu apologizing if he was allowed to do it? According to you, there's nothing to ask for mercy for. And he said, no, he did it at the wrong time because he did it in Nisan. But then we figured out that he didn't really do it in Nisan because he would have known that halacha. He wasn't such a Baal Teshuvah that he didn't know that. But what he didn't know was the Chumrah that you're not allowed to do it on the 30th of Adar itself. That was the 30-second version of the 1 hour shiur. And next week we will go on to Tumah in Pesach Sheni and do women count? Any questions?
Yeah, yes, Johnny.
Yes, Leon.
I have a question. When you refer to the 30th of Adar, possibly being the 1st of Nisan, are you talking about where witnesses might turn up and say, oh, well, I've just seen the new moon?
Yes.
That's the reason you're...
Yes, correct. And in that scenario, if they turn up a bit late, what happens is you have 2 days Rosh Chodesh. Remember? They make that day the 30th of Adar, and then we have another day the following day later because they've come too late to make the 30th of Adar into the 1st of Nisan. So that's why we make the next day the 1st of Nisan. But if they'd come early enough, that 30th, so at the beginning of the time, that 30th, it's a bit like a stem cell. A stem cell has got the potential to go and be all sorts of things. That's why stem cells are so important in medicine today, because you can take stem cells and it has the potential to become a kidney or a liver or a brain or a heart or whatever. It's that pluripotentiality of the stem cell that makes it so valuable. The 30th of Adar, or that particular 24-hour period, has the potential either to be the 30th of Adar or the 1st of Nisan. And circumstances will dictate which one it's going to be. Any other questions, comments, complaints? No, if they've got complaints, I don't want any complaints. I've had enough of them recently. Okay. I wish you all Chag Sameach for tonight. Just those of you in our area, 5:45. If you understand Hebrew, come and listen to Sharon Heller, who was a brigadier general in Shabak. I've no doubt that he will be telling us stuff that we don't know. And there'll be lots of stuff he won't be telling us that we're not allowed to know. But I'm sure it will be fascinating. Those of you who understand Hebrew, please come and join us. If you don't want to do that, you can't understand the Hebrew, Minchas at 7:10, followed by a short 15-minute drasha, and then a tefillah chagigit, a festive mariv with hallel and musical instruments come and celebrate the beginning of Yom Ha'atzmaut with us tonight. Mariv, I guess, will be about 7:35, something like that. Okay, Chag Sameach, everyone.
Thank you, Johnny.
Thank you, Johnny. Thanks very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. All the best. Bye.